You're listening to the Journey Podcast. Could there be a transformative journey awaiting us as we unravel our habits, revealing unexpected pathways to growth and well-being? Stay tuned for today's episode. Hi, I'm Petra Brunbauer, and with decades of experience with sadness, pain, anxiety, and stress, I finally figured out how to leave all that behind. And this podcast shows you how to break free permanently so you can reclaim your sanity and find the self-esteem and energy to go after the life you desire. With real talk about mental health, holistic healing, and the tough journey of coming out the other end. This is the Journey Podcast. Welcome to today's episode. In this episode, we embark on a journey of self-discovery and growth as we explore the process of unwinding habits that no longer align with our highest good. We delve into the intricate web of behaviors and routines that shape our daily lives, examining how these habits can impact our overall health and well-being. Join us as we navigate the transformative process of letting go and releasing habits that no longer serve our greater purpose. By cultivating self-awareness and embracing change, we empower ourselves to create positive shifts in our lives and embark on a path of healing and personal evolution. Yeliena Theofilatos immigrated to the US when she was 20, falling in love with New York City and its spirit of limitless possibilities and opportunities. Her leap of faith eventually brought her into graduate school to become a therapist like she had always wanted. But the pandemic put a pause on her plans to find employment as a social worker, so she turned towards studying more and opening her own business, My Blooming Heart Hypnotherapy and Coaching, in late 2021. She started off by serving women entrepreneurs like herself to overcome anxiety, but has since expanded her audience to include everyone who wants to find lasting inner calm, release depression, and quit smoking. She lives on the Big Island in Hawaii with her husband and 2 cats. Here is my interview with Yeliena Theofilatos. Hi, Yeliena. It's so great to have you on the podcast. I've been looking forward to getting to chat with you because unwinding habits is such an interesting topic for today's conversation. Welcome to the podcast.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here today to chat with you and just to introduce more people to this topic that I'm so passionate about.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you here, and I'm very curious as to what we'll be talking about. Do you want to share a little bit about yourself and your story and actually how you came to do what you do today? Because that's actually a really interesting space to be in.
Sure. And by telling my story, I also going to narrow our attention down on a couple of habits I'm going to be touching upon in particular because it's a big topic and we can get very lost in it unless we just stay with one or two. From my story, you will find out what happened, how I got here. So my story began in Russia when I was born, but then I dropped out of college there, just said okay, this is not the life I want. I was studying finance and banking, secretly desiring to be a therapist, which I am now, like a psychotherapist all my life. And that was my only one chance to come to and stay in the United States. So I did it. I went to New York, and during the summer 2010, I realized that I'm not going back. Stayed, went to school in New York, ultimately got my documents in order, everything. I had this whole crazy immigration story we're not going to get into. And sometime throughout that time, I also, actually, never mind. I brought smoking tobacco habit with me over from Russia, which was a really unnecessary because tobacco is so expensive in the United States. But never mind that, the way I start smoking, and that's, of course, one of those habits I would like to talk about today, because it's one of the most deadly ones to start, but also is very vicious and sneaky. I call it very sticky too, because it likes to just stick to people and it feels like it's very hard to unwind it. unless you know what you're doing. So I brought it over with me. I started smoking when I was like 18, 19 because I wanted to be cool, of course. Why else? I was like a straight A student, athlete, dancer, you name it. And I wanted to rebel. I pierced my tongue when I was 16, did a tattoo, smoked my first cigarette. Like I did the whole thing. Differentiation. Here we go. And I thought I would quit anytime. Like, oh, I'm just playing around. So by the time I got to New York, I was like, oh my God, I'm not playing around. I'm actually like deep into this. And I eventually became a yoga teacher along the way with my like psych studies and realized that smoking doesn't go well with meditating and teaching yoga. It's not in integrity. So I kind of forced myself to quit cold turkey, suffer through a lot of cravings, just like this tension that is there if you don't know what you're doing again. The second time around, my smoking habit came around when I was in grad school studying for social work to become a therapist finally in my like later, not 70s, my later 20s. And since I didn't have any self care left, which was like I had a whole routine, yoga, meditation, journaling before grad school demolished it all. Like there was not even 5 minutes to do anything. If I had 5 minutes, I would sleep instead. Yeah, this is where it like reared its ugly head again. And I find myself not just in a habit of smoking, but also in a habit of worrying, which I didn't consider to be a habit. It was just something I did in my mind. But it eventually just seeing myself powerless over those smoking and just being anxious all the time led me to find the book, The Craving Mind by Dr. Jod, the neuroscientist and mindful researcher, and Unwinding Anxiety. And this is where my journey to unwind both habits of worrying and smoking began in earnest. And I'm just going to pause right there.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing your story up to that point. And those both together, I mean, each separate habit can be, like you said, if smoking is a deadly habit. So, and anxiety, I have sort of the worry and anxiety part. I have the feeling that it can be very detrimental as well, not just our mental health, also our physical health, because it starts spilling over. So it's really interesting that you are experiencing the two habits together. Now, I imagine you finished grad school and you found a way to actually unpack out these habits and unwind them. So, how does your story continue from there?
Thank you very much. I did realize that I have to break free from both. It couldn't be just healing smoking or healing anxiety. For me to be able to heal anxiety fully, completely, I have to let go of smoking. And for me to let go of smoking, I had to heal anxiety as well. I read Unwinding Anxiety like during the summer or early fall, just after I graduated. I was still smoking here and there by then, kind of very sad about it. And it was funny because I felt kind of also ashamed of myself. That was like big layer to it too. And I'm afraid a lot of people feel that out there because I have already knew the habits were perpetuated because I read The Craving Mind. It speaks about all habits in general. I recommend, but I couldn't put it into practice. And actually, Dr. Jod, who then wrote the Unwinding Anxiety book, received feedback that people love The Craving Mind, but they don't know how to put it in practice. So I was not alone in that. So finally, he really broke it down really clearly and really seeing worrying for what it is in terms of how it perpetuates anxiety allowed me to finally take care of it because I had an awareness now that every time I worry, it doesn't create more certainty in my life. It promises worrying. It disguises itself as like problem solving. We think that we're problem solving and we're planning when we're actually just adding layers to our own suffering. But because planning and problem solving feels rewarding to us, it feels like it's basically conducive to our survival. Brain latches on to any behavior that gives us this even temporary reward. So it thinks that worrying is contributing to our well being, while in reality, it drives our nervous system to the point of panic. And when we panic, our rational mind just goes offline and we believe every outlandish, worst case scenario, highly improbable story in our head because our mind can do this really, can play a game with us like, okay, yeah, very unlikely, but what if? And here we go again. And it's like never ending unless we really realize what drives it underneath it. It's hard to stop worrying unless you realize what's the mechanism. So realizing this mechanism and really seeing worrying for what it is allow me to now when I notice that I start to worry, I'm like, it's not like I'm shutting myself down, but I'm really aware and mindful throughout the whole process. And I'm really checking in with myself, what I'm getting out of it. Am I getting out of more peace? Am I getting out a solution? Sometimes you do actually get out a solution from worrying, and that ironically it can hook our brain even more to it. But most of the time, it's I just more stress. Transforming my relationship with worrying by self observation definitely helped me. And same with smoking. I start to notice what is the end result of smoking? Is it that temporary high that I get in a very, I don't know, 3 minutes or so, or everything else that I don't like about it? I don't like the taste. I don't like the smell. I don't like the heaviness in my chest and guilt and whatever else I felt afterwards, but I would skip over all of those feelings. And this method tells you, no, you got to stay with it without creating more stories in your head, but just stay with the sensations and allow your brain to catch up really to the lack of the reward. And when your brain sees it for what it is and says, oh, wait a minute, this is what I get out of it, it will naturally over time let go of the habit. And there is no need to fight it like a lot of people do when we quit smoking in particular. It's going to be easier, definitely, than trying to do it cold turkey or any other way. So, yeah, I hope that helps.
Now, I'm curious. You said that over time we can let go of this habit. So, I know that many people like to see some instant changes. And so it's kind of hard to wait around for things to change. But what is sort of the timeline that we need to actually prepare ourselves for when we're trying to let go of habits? I mean, this is not going to happen tomorrow. So what should we be planning for when we are wanting to let go of things?
That's a great question. And I don't think anybody else except you just saw that eye roll that I did when you said about the timeline and how we want everything to be instant. And just a quick comment about that. I'm a hypnotherapist, and a lot of people want to come to me for like one session on anything. And I'm like, no, this is not how it works. Actually, my last client who I worked with smoking, she did one off session for smoking hypnotherapy with some other hypnotherapists a long time ago. And what she did, she went out and bought a pack of cigarettes after that. So I'm not a believer in that. And because there is a timeline, our brains learn by repetition. And for it to learn a different pathway, it needs to learn it all over again, depending on a person. In my work, I saw the result from 3 to 5 sessions. So I would say, what does it look like when you're doing it yourself, to when you are not necessarily being guided by someone? I would imagine it's about a month or 2 months of observing yourself when you are giving into the craving or giving into the habit in the mindful way, bringing awareness to everything that you don't like about it. This is where it's kind of tricky because some people had a client who really just a spirit of playfulness and enjoyment. She's like, but smoking, it's part of me. And now you're asking me to like bring attention to everything that I don't like about it. There's a little bit of resistance to being comfortable with that discomfort. But I don't see any better way to really teach your brain. But it takes a repetition and about, I would say, 14 of those repetitions of like, okay, here we go again. We gave into this habit again. What are we getting out of it? The sensation that I don't like. And interestingly enough, after you do it enough times, like about 10 to 15 times, next time you think about this thing, let's say smoking, and your brain like, oh, wait, this is not good for me, but it's not like a rational thought. It's more of a sensation. I'm like, oh, I'm got to get out of that heaviness, that cough. It's something that your brain recalls and says like, I don't really care about it. And this is where like the sense of freedom really comes in.
Yeah, that sounds like a wonderful change. Although the road to that change can be somewhat scary when we're trying to let go of things that maybe have given us some comfort in the past or bring some sort of place of at least knowing. So, in the case of smoking, it's almost comforting to know, okay, I can take the cigarette, I will feel better, whether that's true or realistic or not, right? Those are the kind of things that we rely on. And then stopping those habits can put us in a place where we just don't know what will happen or what we might even replace this with. So, do we have to replace habits with other habits, or can we unwind them and leave sort of a blank space? So, with, for example, the smoking, if people unwind this habit and they stop smoking, do you find that they need something else to fill that with in times where they might be anxious and they would reach for a cigarette, or in social situations where they would reach for that cigarette? Do they need to find something, or can you leave just space for that to be after?
Yes, you can leave space, but I feel like initially it's better to find something else that you can redirect your attention to. Let's say with anxiety and smoking, taking them both together. For anxiety, if for just stress and tension in general, smoking works like, and I heard it from somebody else, it's like we are punctuating our day with smoking breaks to punctuate the tension. It builds up, and we have to release it. So we learn to smoke because that allows for the few moments and minutes of time of us just being with ourselves. This is what the reality is. It's not about smoking ultimately. Yeah, there is like addictive quality to nicotine, of course, but it's more so we just need to breathe. We just need to come back and regulate our nervous systems ultimately. I do believe that first, we definitely need to start with disenchanting our brain with an old habit, and not just yet putting a new habit on top of it, because then it's going to be like a conflict in between them too. But disenchant your brain thoroughly first. And there, soon enough, of course, don't wait too long. Start to replace it with new ways of regulating your nervous system in terms of anxiety. And don't just replace it with like scrolling social media or eating sugary sweets, because that's not really replacing it. It's only creating a new habit on top of which is ultimately is not serving. There are ways to bring peace and calm to our system that is sustainable and doesn't require any substance, so to say. And when you're really good at it, it could be just awareness of the craving, awareness of the tension that is enough to release it. That's the mindfulness in action, because it's not always when we, like you said, in a social setting, we can like do our heart centered breath. Let's say what I do when I want to regulate my nervous system. Sometimes we are at the table when we can walk away. But if we get really good at just paying attention to the sensations and being with them and not necessarily having to act on them, we see that they actually eventually dissipate and dissolve. And that also takes practice, of course.
Yeah, it can be kind of scary to sit with the feelings and sensations that might come up. So, definitely, probably a good time to have some grace and patience with yourself and give yourself that space and time. So, you mentioned something really important, that is the nervous system regulation. So, of course, whether it comes to anxiety or the addictions or even the smoking part of it, the nervous system plays a big role in that. So,
Mhm.
you touched on the heart focused breathing, which I don't know if listeners are familiar with heart math, but of course, that is one of the ways that we can start regulating. Do you have any other ways that you like regulating or that you recommend to your clients that they can use sort of when, maybe even on a daily basis, when they feel they need that and they can plug that into their lifestyle?
Definitely. My favorite of my own, and of course, I recommend it to everybody just because I love it, because how potent is for me when I get into like anxiety loop and I quickly realize that doesn't matter what I think about now, I'm driving myself deeper. So I know that I need to, and that's my mantra, regulate first, think later. To bring that regulatory energy, I hum and I sing. I'm not a singer whatsoever, but I have a couple of actually mantras that I still have from my yoga teacher training that just stuck with me for the better, of course. And I just sing them. And I kind of fell into that method, not knowing that actually singing and humming activates our vagus nerve, which runs on the both sides of our neck and towards our heart. It definitely touches upon our vocal box or cords. I don't know how you call it exactly, but when we hum and we sing, we activate it. And I also really highly recommend just to put your hand on your heart, because it's also, even without having to do the heart center breathing, it also really brings comfort and activate your vagus nerve, which connects to your heart. Those two, I feel like very easy to do. Just stay with them long enough, just like for a couple of minutes or so, so that your nervous system has a chance to switch gears to a more of a calmer state.
Yeah, those are great tips. And I like both of those. I don't know, like some people might not know what the vagus nerve is, but it has a very big function. I mean, it's the longest nerve, I think, in the whole body. So it has a huge function, especially when it comes to regulation. That is amazing. And those are things that people can do sort of anytime and anywhere, because you can hum quietly, even like in the car or in a corner, or even if you're at work in the bathroom stall or something, right? So you can do those things even while you're out and about if you feel that you need that regulation. Now, I'm wondering a little bit when it comes to habits, are there anything that we do maybe in our lives or during the day that actually perpetuate certain habits like anxiety or smoking? Anything that we should first become aware of that we might be doing that might actually be perpetuating those things?
Mm-hmm. If I would answer that question just like in general, I would say that for both of those habits, what perpetuates them is when we allow tension to build up and we don't do anything about it. And by doing anything about it, I don't mean you need to have like 30 minutes of self care in the morning. Ideally, you definitely should if you can. But what I mean, that tension that happens throughout the day, and it throws us off to the point that our rational mind have to take a backseat, because stress always makes us slightly frantic. And when we're frantic, there is no way we can talk ourselves out of much, whether it's smoking or any other like cupcake or anything else. So if we really want to regulate those impulses better, we do want to regulate the stress levels in our bodies and our minds by taking those short breaks here and there and punctuating that stress, basically taking the deflating it, taking the power out of it, coming back to a more regulated state. And from that state, when your nervous system feels better, it's so much easier to handle everything else, cravings, impulses, you name it.
So, are the cravings and impulses sort of like coping mechanisms for us then to deal with the stress or the tension that arises? Are they just kind of negative coping mechanisms?
Cravings is a cue. It's for you to engage in a behavior of some sort. It's appeared because there was a moment in the past that the person's brain paired certain conditions with a certain behavior or thing that he or she does. Let's say this is the end of the day and they need to transition into the evening. And then in the past, let's say they used to drink, and if they would have a particular stressful day that day, meaning their willpower is very much diminished by then, it's like it handles so much. Like, I'm tired, just tired in general, even without a stressful day. And then the craving comes in. It's like your brain saying, like, hey, wait a minute, there was a moment in time you did this thing, drinking, and it made you feel good. Why don't you do it again? In a way, it is like a shadow or sort of a aftermath of some not so great coping mechanism that we acquired sometime in the past. I would say it's like a messenger of those.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. I never looked at it that way. So that's really amazing how you explain that. I like that. It adds to the awareness, right? I mean, when you become aware of how this works, then I think you have a much greater chance of actually unwinding and overcoming those habits. Like you said, once you understand what is happening. If our viewers are curious and they've been inspired by this episode, how can they work with you? What kind of programs and services do you offer, and how could listeners connect with you?
Thank you very much for this question. Currently offering Quit Smoking for Good program. I just started it. I've been focusing on anxiety primarily, but I always wanted to bring smoking in. And I started just working with people and had great reviews. And I'm like, why I am not like doing it, really putting it out there. So I have a program for that. And I have a few different programs for anxiety, depending what modalities you want to choose. Do you want a more hypnotherapy, or you want to focus on more of a nervous system regulation itself? All of those matters. You can check out my website. It's very easy. It's mybloomingheart.com. And that's pretty much it. Or you can follow me on Instagram if you just want to ask me a question and say hello. My Blooming Heart Hypnotherapy, one word.
Amazing. And Yeliena also has her own podcast called Peace Grows Here. So you can listen into her podcast from your favorite podcast provider and check out some of her episodes. And we, of course, will be linking to all of Yeliena's offerings in the show notes as well. So you can have a look there to see how you can connect with her and what her socials are. So you can pop in, say hello, connect with her, ask her any questions that you like, and hopefully work with her and unwind some of your own habits that you've been dealing with that you might think it might be time to let go of. Well, this has been another incredible episode, and I really hope our listeners have enjoyed this journey into unwinding habits as much as I have. It has been very enlightening and fantastic to chat with you today. Thank you so much for all this wisdom and knowledge that you brought and shared with us. I'm very grateful that you came on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you so much for giving me space to share about this. I hope it was helpful and interesting and inspiring to all the listeners as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know anybody who doesn't have any habits that they would maybe like to let go of. So I think this will be very, very helpful. Yeah, thank you again so very much. And take care, Yeliena.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to listen in. If you enjoy the Journey podcast, please support us by subscribing, sharing on social media, and leaving us a review. We appreciate you. And you can find more of The Journey on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and our website, thejourney.com. Sending you love and courage, and see you next time.